When Expectations Are Aligned, a Case Study by Dr. Terry Buckmiller, Frances South, and Catherine South. In collaboration with the Institute for Professionalism and Ethical Practice.
I'm Catherine, and I'm a patient at Boston Children's, and I currently work as a nurse.
I am Frances, and I'm Catherine's mother.
When I came to Boston Children's with my consultation with Dr. Buckmiller, I came from a place of a lot of fear and apprehension of surgery, as the last surgery I'd had been very traumatic. I was adamant that I did not want to have surgery again, which is an interesting place to be when going into a surgical consultation. But I had been told several times that it might not be safe to do the takedown, but finally it seemed that my bowel had healed enough to do the takedown, but I was so afraid that of the uncertainty of having another surgery, especially after needing emergency surgery under such scary circumstances.
So the first time I met the Souths was in our colorectal program, and she had been referred to us from a colleague of mine through Children's. And so I got a little heads up before her visit that they were sending someone for a second opinion, and that she was such a sweet lady, sweet young lady, and very gentle, kind person. And could you do a little homework, because they're really, looking for another opinion. She's been through a lot.
In that first conversation with Dr. Buckmiller, she immediately put me at ease by telling me my story and asking me to correct her if she made any mistakes, which she did not, which was very unusual because we've told our story so many times, and it was very refreshing to have someone know it so well and feel so confident about it, but also include me as a part in case that I felt that she had left something out. So that was very, very refreshing.
I was in the first meeting with Dr. Buckmiller, and Catherine and I drove from Western Mass, and it was a tense car ride because as a mother, inside, I wanted her to have the reversal. I wanted that, but I had to listen to what she was saying, which was, I am fine. I am not imperfect because I have an ileostomy, and I identify with having it now, and I have been with this for over a year. And she kept saying, I'm fine. And so that was my role, was to help to be sort of the bad cop in this conversation with Dr. Buckmiller. And I'm a rule follower, so I took this role very seriously. And so when Dr. Buckmiller walked in with Catherine's giant file and put it to one side and focused on Catherine and said, I've read it, tell me if I've read it right. It sounds overstated, but literally I felt her relax next to me.
I think it was so important because it did show that she cared and that she had prepared and that she was invested in this case, and that I was a person, just not an ileostomy takedown surgery, but a person with a history and bringing a lot to the table besides just a surgical problem.
Anybody in your office is vulnerable, no matter how simple the diagnosis or how complex it is. And I think the best way to deal with that is just to try to establish a relationship and not to pretend that you completely understand their position. You don't want to say, I understand, because we can't understand until someone's been through that journey. Some people that are coming in for what we would consider a very, very simple problem are just as freaked out as someone that may have been through 20 surgeries. So I think trying to remember that and to keep that sensitivity is always extremely helpful if we can do that.
I think during the process of giving and getting informed consent, there's often so much information that's given, and it's often given somewhat quickly. And I often have felt that I wasn't given an opportunity to really say, can you clarify this? Or I don't quite feel comfortable with this. And often felt that I was being rushed through informed consent because it was just sort of a bit of hospital business that needed to be taken care of rather than a critically important part of the patient experience. Dr. Buckmiller she really listened to me, and she gave me power as a patient. And I had felt, like most patients do, I felt very vulnerable, especially after the emergency surgery, especially with surgeons just coming in and fixing things. And she really let me decide and make decisions about whether or not I was going to have the surgery. She didn't force me to go either way. She just presented me with the facts in a very compassionate and understanding way.
My philosophy has always been to try to address those concerns and not wait until the day of surgery when you start going through the 1%, 2%, 3%, because at that point you're just focused on the day and the surgery. So I think it's a combination of articulating what you need to articulate as far as the risks of surgery from a medical legal standpoint as far as your informed consent. But I think there's also another important component is to try to explore what that means to them and their lifestyle. Her decision to come to surgery, she knew had some risks associated with it. And the timing of the surgery truly didn't matter. This was completely elective. And for us, recognizing that, it allows her to really be in charge of that timing. There's some situations that aren't elective, and we can we can give advice and encourage people, but again, this is a choice that the family's making the majority of time. And I think Catherine waited until a time where she said, I'm actually through with important things at school. I've gotten through my finals. I now have time to dedicate to this process. If it goes just like planned, wonderful, I hit the home run. But if there's any complications, then she also had time to deal with that. And I think that was a really important part of the process because I knew that she was really worried about those potential complications.
Well, one of the things she said that really impacted both of us was that the complication rate was, I think it was 1%, but that she said, if you're the 1%, it's 100% for you. And we talked about it, and it wasn't, this very small, brush it under the rug. And that made a huge difference.
She was very realistic, so she didn't sort of gloss over the fact that there could be some difficult parts of the recovery, and she gave me sort of a timeline of what to expect, which was very important for me as someone who likes to plan and plans as a way of coping with uncertainty. So she really gave us direction, and didn't shy away from explaining that there could be risk to it. Even though we had experienced risk before, she wasn't afraid about talking about that. So Dr. Buckmiller prepared me for recovery by explaining what the stay in the hospital would be like, so about how long I would stay in the hospital, what would happen on each day, when I would be able to start eating again, when I would have my wound unpacked, some of the technical things, which I thought was very helpful to really know what would be happening and how I would be feeling, instead of just saying, you'll be in the hospital for less than a week, you'll be able to eat soon. She was able to say, when you do this, you can eat. And then when you're doing this, you can go home. So there were clear milestones that were laid out. Definitely, when I had that preparation, it made the hospital stay less daunting. And I knew that if I didn't meet a milestone on a particular day, that it wasn't the end of the world, because I knew that I was still moving forward in the recovery based on the information that she had given me.
And she was actually, during that time of milestones in that 4 or 5 days in the hospital, and Dr. Buckmiller came to see Catherine, Catherine explained that she had reached one of the milestones. She was so genuinely excited. It was just lovely. And then she said, well, let's see about that bandage or...
Yes, I had packing in my wound, which I was very anxious about having her remove or having anyone remove. But she had come to my room after the end of a 24-hour call on her way home, and she sat on the edge of my bed and she changed the dressing for the first time, which I saw as a huge sign of compassion and respect, just to take something so simple, but to take the time to do it and to talk to me first. And even though she must have been absolutely exhausted, she took the time to do that for me.
I do remember changing the dressing and just, first of all, it's something that I always liked to do anyway, is to examine my patients and to see how they're doing and have a conversation, and just to also reassure her that everything was going really well and we were extremely happy with the outcome, to date at that time, and that I would be really happy when I saw her in the office after I knew that she was really recovering well. I guess thinking about Catherine's journey, she had many excellent people take care of her at many different institutions, but yet she'd still had a rough go. I look back and I say I feel kind of blessed that things went so lovely for her. I was so happy that we didn't have to tackle a complication, that things went so nicely for her, because she'd been in excellent hands, but she had just had a tough journey, and that can happen to me, that can happen to any other surgeon, and it will happen to us. We don't have things go perfectly all the time. So that's what also stands out in my mind, is that I'm happy that her last chapter was a happy one. I think the challenges were always a little time limited, and in a perfect world, we'd love to have conversations that last more than 15 or 20 minutes. But I think if it's an open dialogue about someone's experiences or someone's fears, or how do you get to that, ask those questions about what didn't we talk about that you'd like to talk about before the surgery, or absolutely offer people to email, to call, to communicate with you, because I will also tell them, I guess one little tip is, I don't want you to wake up at 3 in the morning and be worried about something that I could answer in 5 seconds for you that's going to take away that fear. And so I think those little ways of opening the conversation and making sure that the conversation stays open before the surgery and after that process is extremely important as well. To know that we're reachable and we have the same goals that the family does.
My advice for surgeons would be to take your time, to take a breath before you enter the room, and to focus on the patient in that room, and to put everything else behind you for those moments that you're discussing the surgery with your patient and their family, and to really listen to what the parents and patient have to say. You may know everything about that particular type of surgery, but you don't know everything about that particular patient.